Today's guest is someone with whom my life has been intertwined with for some 30 years, Carolyn Mayling. Carolyn, her family, and I have crossed paths in so many ways through a friendship with her sister Sam that started back in the 90s, working with Phil, Sam's partner, and through Redruce Theatre School, where my wife worked alongside Carolyn, Sam, and their mum, June, and many others. I even attended some part-time classes there when I was about 12 years old. Carolyn has travelled a profound midlife journey. While I had some understanding of what we're going to talk through today, I hadn't fully grasped the magnitude of her experiences along the way until I read her book recently, The Future is Rosie. Carolyn's story is one of heartbreak, loss, but also strength and purpose. And I'm absolutely honoured to have her here today with us to share her story. Carolyn has found a way to keep going, not just surviving, and finding light from the darkness. Hello, Carolyn.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm very chuffed to be here.
Well, I'm just so pleased you agreed, because I think your story just says so much, and we're going to dig into that a little bit today. Now, May, of course, 2003, you were 48, and your life took a course that would change your life and your journey forever. Tell me a little bit about what life was like before that date, and more importantly, tell me about Rosie, what she was like as a character. I understand she was a problem solver. She loved performing. Tell me about Rosie.
Yeah, life before everything took an absolute drastic turn. It was our normal. I wouldn't say it was normal, because we ran a very theatrical thespian life, really. As someone who ran a theatre school, it was our family business. My mum was running the school at the time, and I was teaching dance within the business. I was married and had two little girls. Ellie was at that point, she was let me see. So when everything sort of took a turn for the worse, Ellie was 14 and Rosie was 10, and just before that, everything had been normal, and we were actually in the middle of panto rehearsals. We had a normal life, you know. It was always our house was always filled with kids singing, dancing, because both of the children were at Redruce as pupils. They were both very much into everything theatrical, and they made up shows all the time. So literally, our house was full of costumes that they'd made, and scripts that they'd written, and music that they'd composed. And just before, in fact, Ellie and Rosie and a couple of friends they'd composed a musical which was called Forever and a Day. They'd got a whole load of Redruce kids in on the act, and they cast it. And it was to raise money for a wheelchair for the daughter of a friend of ours who was disabled. And they put this show on. It was actually quite remarkable. Rosie had written a lot of the lyrics, and they put on this show at what we had a theatre at the time, which was the Novello Theatre at Ascot. They filled the whole theatre, put on this whole musical for one night only, and it was amazing. And they raised all the money that they needed for the wheelchair. And Rosie actually had stood on stage at the end of the show and given a completely unscripted thank you to the audience. She was only 10 at the time, so you know, she was very out there. She was very unafraid of what people thought. She was strong-willed, and she knew her own mind, and she loved to laugh and joke, and she was always up to pranks. She was all backstage at our theatre. She was always she was always up to mischief in the best sort of possible way. She was sort of playing pranks on the cast in our pantos and so on. And just the normal stuff of living life as normal as you do, and not thinking anything bad is ever going to happen. Yeah. And then, of course, it did.
So that was, am I right in saying it was around December of 2002?
Yeah, so it was kind of early December 2002, and Rosie and Ellie, actually, they were in our panto. They were rehearsing panto, which was Puss in Boots, and Rosie had a little cameo role, which was really looking forward to, because she hated like the ensemble ballet sort of parts. She just wasn't that sort of kid. And she was actually playing Minnie Mean, which was the kind of sidekick to the villain. She was very excited about this. And then just partway through the rehearsal process, she started to have a chest infection, or what we thought was a chest infection. And it wouldn't go away, and she was getting breathless. And, we had endless trips to the doctors to get antibiotics. And, people don't really kind of think very much of these sort of things. You just think, well, your child's got a chest infection, okay, antibiotics will sort it out. And it didn't. It just got really bad, and it got so bad that Rosie had to come off the panto. And then we kind of got through Christmas. And in fact, she was very ill on Christmas Eve, and we had some friends over, and she disappeared. And I went, "Where's Rosie?" And I found her in her bedroom. Went up to the bedroom, and she was in bed, and she said, "Mummy, I'm going to die of this." And I went, "Don't be ridiculous, stop being a drama queen." And she went, I am going to die of this. Anyway, so we got through Christmas, and she was very poorly, and by the new year, I took her to, I got her referred to a consultant, and they still couldn't work out what was the matter. And then a friend of mine said, "Why are they not doing this scan, that scan, another scan?" Because her son, was a GP, and he'd said, "Well, why are they not doing this, that, and the other?" So I said this to the consultant, and she said, "You can't just go ordering scans willy-nilly." And I said, "Look, please just do it," because I had a really bad feeling in my gut there was something wrong. Anyway, so she went in for these scans, and then 20 minutes later, she came running back into the room, and she said, "Right," she said, she was white, and she said, "We've got to get her up to John Radcliffe, like, really fast. We've got to blue light her. We've just found pulmonary embolisms on the arteries going into her lungs, which is why she can't breathe." So all of a sudden, we were thrust into this, where we went in the ambulance, we were blue lighted, and we were thrust into this intensive care situation when we got there. And from there, it just kind of escalated into being in this situation where we were surrounded by medical experts, none of whom knew what was the matter. Rosie was very bewildered and quite frightened. So was I. David was at home looking after Ellie. And we had sort of days and days of not knowing what on earth was going on, and then got transferred up to the children's ward at the old hospital. And they still didn't know what was the matter. And they were doing every test known to mankind. It was really quite a scary place to be, and we were kind of surrounded by all this kind of medical procedure with all our control taken away from us. And I would look out of the window sometimes and like normal life going on outside the hospital window. Just, I'd look at people's houses you could see in the distance, and they were just like having normal lives. And I was thinking, what is going on here? I felt really, really removed, and there was no one to talk to. Then time passed, and Rosie was still in hospital, and they still hadn't sorted out what was the matter. And then one day, she'd actually exhausted all the toys in the playroom. She was up on the children's ward, and she was kind of really fed up because she wasn't like desperately ill all the time.
Yeah.
She was looking around. She was in a ward with a lot of children who had cancer. She didn't have cancer. And she was watching these children with their hair falling out, and it was really scary. But anyway, she'd kind of exhausted all the toys on the ward, and she was feeling quite sorry for all the other children. And she said to the play specialist one day, I think she was colouring or something in the playroom, and she said, "When I'm out of here, I'm going to raise a lot of money to put on shows to raise money for the children here, because I don't want them to ever feel like I am. I don't want them to ever be bored." It kind of stuck with me, that. And then, and while I was going through all that, and they did a lot of procedures on Rosie, including some big operations to try and find out what was wrong. So she was having heart biopsies and all sorts. And I felt very, very alone at that time. And it seemed like there was no support for me, because my family were at home, and the other parents in the hospital were very, very kind of tied up with their own children. There were a lot of very ill children there, and the nurses were very rushed off their feet. And one day I locked myself in the toilet. I was just completely overwhelmed, and a nurse came and she said, "Are you okay?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm absolutely fine." And absolutely, I didn't feel fine at all. I was literally terrified. And I said, "I'm fine because, you're busy. You've got the children to care for." And she went, "Yeah, but if you're not okay, just come and talk to me." But I never did, because I felt like that the support wasn't, it just wasn't there for that.
What did she have?
So she had so they went in basically with this heart biopsy, and they went in to find out what was going on in her lungs. And we were very stressed out that day because it was a big op. And then when she came round from the operation, we were called, it was like a whole day's operation, it took hours and hours and hours, and we were called into this room and they said, we think it's good news, we think it's blood clot. And I was going, oh, thank God, because I thought it was actually cancer. I thought she had tumours, because they had actually said, it could be tumour. And I thought, well, if it's just blood clot and they've taken it out, then we're on a winning streak here, it's going to be okay. And they were scanning her 2 days later, and then they were just kind of like, they were looking like really quiet. And I went, what's the matter? And they said, the blood clots have come back. And then they realised after more investigation that what she actually had was vasculitis, which was an autoimmune disease which affected the blood vessels. So her body had kind of turned in on itself and was attacking itself. And they didn't know how to sort it out. They medicated her. She was on all sorts of stuff, including warfarin, actually. And she came home on warfarin, which our local pharmacy were quite shocked about, because they were going, why is a child on this? It's a horrendously powerful drug. And I said, because she's been told to.
How was she at that time, Carolyn?
So she came home. She was in hospital for a few months, and then she came home, and she was desperate to get back to school. And she got her bag ready by the door and her little blazer and everything, but she was really weak, and she was really thin. She'd lost like so much weight, so she was home, and then she was only home for a few days, and she just wasn't right at all. And then one day she went out in the garden and she said, Mummy, I'm just going on my swing. And I said, just be careful. And she was going really high on this swing. And I was going, Rosie, just slow down. I don't want you to swing this high. And she said, Mummy, I don't want to be limited. Don't limit my life. I'm not going to be limited in any way. And then the next day, she had a pulmonary hemorrhage at home, and we managed to get her back to John Radcliffe. And she had a cardiac arrest when she got there. And she went on to life support for 9 days, and then we were told that she was brain dead, in a vegetative state, and we had to turn the machine off. And there were a lot of conversations about whether they should turn the machine off or not. And what she'd said to me on that swing, it just stayed with me. And I thought, she doesn't want to be limited in any way, and I cannot imagine that she would want to spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair as a vegetable. This is not Rosie. She was so dynamic and so colourful. She used to wear like the brightest colours, and she used to wear like rainbow colours all the time. And she wore stripy tights. And I just thought, I can't do this to my child who was like so full of life and so vibrant. And then really the decision in the end really was made for us. We just couldn't. We had to turn the machine off. Anyway, then that was it. Rosie had passed away, and me and David went, what do we do? We just didn't know what to do. There was no support for us. We were taken down to a bereavement services room, and we were given a pile of papers about how to bury your child. And then we were sent off back down the M40, and that was it. And then the next day, David had a cardiac arrest. He had a heart attack. So the next couple of weeks I was really alone and had to kind of get through all the funeral arrangements and stuff, obviously with the help of my wider family.
How did Ellie cope, your other daughter?
Ellie was absolutely in shock and closed down. She was really traumatised, and she said, and she really struggled with it. She was 14, so she was kind of teenage at the same time, so it wasn't an easy thing for her to talk about. So during Rosie's illness, she'd found it really, really difficult. And then afterwards, she found it impossible and just completely closed down, but then kind of went into coping mode. And she went back to school really, really soon, just a couple of days after. And then some close friends kind of took her under their wing and kind of got her through.
And was David's heart attack basically a result of the stress and everything that had gone on? It was?
I think absolutely, undoubtedly. I think it was just had been so stressful, and he'd said when he had the heart attack, he said, "I don't want to live. I don't want to live in a world where Rosie isn't there." And I said, "You better not bloody die, because I'm not doing this on my own." And he pulled through, reluctantly as he was at the time, but he came out just in time for the funeral.
You've got a very supportive family. I guess there's only so far that support helps. So where did you seek support outside of those closest to you?
It was really difficult because I had no way of knowing, because it was like a whole new world to me. This world of like, it's like a club that you don't want to belong to, being a bereaved parent. Somebody turned up on my doorstep, actually. I think I'd gone onto a support group website, and I went on it, and I phoned this helpline, and then and I spoke to somebody who was bereaved for the first time. She was actually really good. And then a couple of days later, someone turned up on my doorstep and said, "Would you like to come to this bereavement support meeting?" And I went, "Yeah, anything really." And I got into the car with this stranger, this lady. She's very nice. And she took me off to this support meeting. It was a really weird experience for me, actually. And we sat in this room. There were about 8 people there. And we sat around this table, and everyone was talking about their bereavement. They were all bereaved parents, mums and dads there. And it was really dark, and they were all like kind of really down, really depressed, and didn't know how to live their lives. And I thought, I can't do this. So I understood what everyone, why everyone was in that place, but I thought, I can't do it like this. I thought, I can't do this for Rosie's sake. She would have been absolutely horrified, or for the sake of the rest of my family, because, we all had to survive somehow, and to survive in a depressed state that's not a life, although I didn't really want to live it at the time. And this is only like a couple of weeks after it all happened. And it was really hard, even just to get up in the morning and brush your teeth. I just couldn't. But I made that decision on that day. I thought, I can't do this. I've got to live a life. I've got to do something. That was maybe just before the funeral, actually. And then we had the funeral. And on the afternoon of her funeral, I was standing in the foyer. In the afternoon, we had a celebration of her life at the Velo Theatre. And all her little friends came along and read poems, and there were flowers and all sorts. It was very, very difficult, but we did that. And I stood in the foyer, and I said to somebody, I've got to create a legacy whereby Rosie is never, ever going to be forgotten. And as I said that, I said, I don't know what it's going to be, but I looked outside the theatre window, and there was this huge double rainbow over the top of the theatre, and I went, I think that's Rosie, and because it's all stripes and it's all bright colours, and I think she's saying, right, it's Rosie's rainbow. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And that was the moment. That was the kind of light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Where I decided to create the charity.
Yeah.
And and the rest was history, really.
Yeah. So I think, was it about September 2003? That's when the charity really started to take a little bit more shape. Talk to me about the charity then. Carolyn, tell me about what its objectives were back then, and where you were hoping to take it. What was its goals, I suppose?
So I spoke to the hospital in the early days, and I said, what can we do for Rosie in her honour, in order to help the children that she wanted to help? And they said, well, how about music therapy? Well, they said art therapy or music therapy, and I said, well, music therapy, definitely, because she loved musicals. So we found a music therapist, and so that's part of what we do, a big part of what we do. And the music therapist does regular sessions every week. In fact, we work out of 3 hospitals now. We've expanded. So we do John Radcliffe Hospital, and we do Stoke Mandeville, where they have a lot of spinal injury, children on the spinal injuries unit. And a lot of children who are in there for extended periods, and also Royal Berks at Reading. And they all run music therapy sessions, which is incredibly powerful for the children. And it's just magical watching that. So, it can calm children down before a serious operation. So, if Rosie had had access to that, it would have been a very, very helpful thing for her.
Yeah.
Or it can motivate them when they don't want to get out of bed. And also, it's really good for disabled and children with special needs. So it can, where the children are non-verbal, music can reach them in a way that the words can't. It's amazing.
Yeah. So
we've expanded that into quite a regular big thing that goes on in all the 3 hospitals. That's one of the things that we do.
Fantastic. And there's of course the choir as well. And I know you've got involved with, retreats. And have you also, as part of this, help support as well parents? Was that part of it?
Yeah. So
tell me about that.
Yeah. So as I explained to you earlier, the support was non-existent when I was there, and the parents, there are still parents of very sick children there. Sadly, children still get ill, and I thought I cannot stand by and allow other parents to suffer like I suffered with the complete loneliness and stress of it all. So now we've got this amazing support system at John Radcliffe. We've got a lady who's an aromatherapist called Amanda, and she looks after the parents basically. So she's like the listening ear, and she can give them an aromatherapy massage if they want it, and they can offload. And she's like the normal person in this hospital environment where they can all turn to. And she's got a sort of medical background as well as a midwife. So very often there are parents there who've got like newborns who are ill. And she knows what to do, and she can kind of guide them and listen. And we've got that, and we've had that for a very, very long time, and that's a really important part of what we do.
Yeah. There's been, you've got some great trustees, and you've had an immense amount of support, haven't you, from friends, family, and talk me through a little bit about some of the other things that the charity's got involved with, because I know you've done gala shows at High Wycombe. You've got involved with Global's Make Some Noise, I think it was, and of course back in 2006, the X Factor. Just tell me a little bit about some of those other events that you've managed to really get Rosie out there to the wider world.
So right back at the beginning, we put on our first show, our first fundraiser, and we did it in quite a small way, but we raised a really big amount of money. And then I got some patrons on board. So we had Lucy Benjamin, who was a past pupil from Red Roofs, absolutely lovely. Maz Murray, who's now starring in Mamma Mia. There were quite a few people that kind of came on board and said, yeah, of course we'd love to be patrons, and they came in and helped with our show. So it was like full of kids doing their stuff on our stage, plus all these professionals who dropped up, and we raised a lot of money that night. And putting on shows was just such an absolutely right way for us to raise money. So we do a regular show, and we're actually just gearing up now to the one at the Wycombe Swan in May, which we do pretty much every year. And we we usually have about 350 children from Red Roofs, plus a whole load of West Endies, who's sort of West End artists and actors and so on, who come in and give their services for the night, and it's just amazing. Last year we raised 26,000 actually on one night, so that was really, really good. But so that's our fundraising that we have to do to keep things going. We're finding it really difficult with grants actually. So in the past, like you said, we had a Global's Make Some Noise grant that ran out. We had a Children in Need, BBC Children in Need, which has run out recently. We've got to reapply. But, they all say it's really hard to get them now. Don't be surprised if we don't award the grant this year. And so we're finding it really difficult, actually. So we really rely on donations and our own fundraising. Yeah. We really rely on that. And it's difficult because we have to raise a lot of money each year.
Yeah. I don't like this expression, but some good has come out of an absolutely awful situation. But alongside that, you then also decided to take another journey yourself. And you spoke to David at the time about having another baby. Talk to me about that and how hard that decision was and what played into that and the journey that you went on there, because that wasn't straightforward, was it?
Absolutely not. So I had this picture in my head of a baby. I was 49, I have to say, so I wasn't like the age where you normally have babies. So I had Ellie, who was then, what was she, 16, 17? No, she was 14 when Rosie passed away. So it was very soon after that, actually. So 15. And then I had this absolute compulsion that I had to have a baby. I have sort of various spiritual beliefs where I believe that Rosie's guiding me, and that was one of them. It came through very, very strong, and she was going, "Mummy, you have to have a baby." And I had this picture of this baby in my head, and I had this voice in my head going, "You can do this now, Mummy. You can make this happen." Anyway, so I spoke to David, who thought I was a bit mad, and he went, "I don't really want this, but if this is really what you want, we'll get some information." So went to the doctors. The doctor said, "Well, yeah, you can do this, but it'll be an IVF journey for you." So then we started this process. My sister, who'd been amazing through all of this, and she always has been amazing ever since, and from that moment, said, "Right, if you need the eggs, I'm going to be the egg donor," because the doctor had said you can't do it with your own eggs, and my sister was younger. She was 10 years younger than me, and so she said, "Well, I can give my eggs." And I went, "Really?" And we went through a lot of counselling with her and with Phil, her partner, and we all sort of sat around, kind of talking about it with various counsellors, and they went, "Okay, that's fine." Sam went through the whole procedure, and we went through IVF a couple of times in a London hospital using my sister's eggs, which very sadly didn't work. And then I hit 50. And then, you talk about life's second act. This was life's second act. So, so then I thought, oh, I don't know what to do. And I kind of got really despondent at that time. But I thought, I can't stop, because I have this picture in my head. I've got to carry on, and I have to have this child. Because it felt like I couldn't see a future without that at that point. So I went on searching, and then another friend of mine said, I think I've got the answer. There's somebody in London you can go and see, by which time I was 53. So I went to a place in London, and they said, "Yeah, we can do this for you with a donor egg." Basically, there's a 3-year waiting list. So you can either wait 3 years, by which time I would have been, I don't know, 57, which is getting a bit, or you can go abroad. And I went, "Well, we'll go abroad then." So she said, so they said, right, so it'll be a donor egg, which they actually found from Moldova in the end. And my husband was the sperm donor. And they said, right, we're going to do all the preparation in London, but then when we say go, you have to fly out to our sister hospital in Limassol, Cyprus. And you literally get 12 hours notice, which is what happened. So in April 2008, we got the call, and we flew out, and we went to this. It was actually Cyprus Easter at the time. It was April, and there were Easter eggs everywhere. And literally went into this hotel, and there was this Easter egg that was as high as the ceiling. And I went, "David, it's a sign. It's a sign." He was going, "Oh, for God's sake!" Anyway, and there were literally Easter eggs all up the dual carriageways and stuff. And we went to the clinic, and the consultant there was a delightful man, and he said, "This is going to work." And I said, "Look, I've been through all this roller coaster, and so far it hasn't, and I don't think I can take another disappointment." And he said, "Trust me," he said, "this is going to work. It's looking good." So I had the embryo transfer. We hung upside down. Well, I hung upside down, not him, on a sunbed with my legs up. And then flew back to London, and they said, "Do a pregnancy test in 9 days," which I did, and in fact we had our Rosie's Rainbow show in the middle of that 9 days, and they'd actually said, "Look, you have to take it easy during the 9 days." And I was going, "How am I going to do that? I've got like 300 children on stage here." Yeah. Anyway, we got through this performance, which was very, very strange, because I had this feeling that it had worked at that time. And then did the pregnancy test, and it had. So I was pregnant, aged nearly 54, had a totally normal pregnancy, and then had my boy when I was 54, Dominic.
Wow. How did that feel? How did that feel?
It was unbelievable. And I was going, "Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Rosie." And I honestly feel like it was a gift from Rosie. And he's just been amazing. And it was the best thing ever. I just felt like it wasn't a replacement for Rosie in any way, and still isn't. But he brought a future back. He gave us back a future, and he gave us a reason to continue. And he brought light and life and fun and toys into our house, where we'd had a very, very dark, quiet house since Rosie had died.
Yeah.
And I've never regretted one single day. And he's now 16.
Wow. Ellie and David, how were they at this point?
During the IVF treatment, Ellie was really not happy about it at all. And we'd actually put it off for quite a long time during the treatment because she'd been so upset about it, and she was going, "I think it's disgusting. I think it's terrible because you're far too old to have a baby, and I don't want another brother or sister because I've only got Rosie, and I only ever want Rosie," which I totally understand. But when Dominic arrived, she fell in love with him. Literally, she looked into his crib thing and just fell in love with him, and they've been so close ever since. It's just amazing. And for David, it wasn't something that he wanted, but he absolutely adored and still adores his son. So, yeah, it was an amazing outcome.
Also, you had another loss, I suppose, with your marriage with David in 2013.
Yeah, there's a very, very high percentage of parents who don't make it after the death of a child. I think the figures were something like that I read at the time, and I don't know if it's right. Something like 96% or something, but I don't know if that's correct these days. But it's very, very hard to be together when you've suffered that sort of loss, unless you're like really like incredibly compatible and incredibly strong together, which we were very different people. We were very, very different, always had been. And he found it very difficult to talk about his grief, whereas I wanted to talk and talk and talk and talk, and still do. Like all these years later, I still, like I am with you, I think it's a woman's thing, maybe. They just have to talk about it all the time. And but for him, he couldn't. He just harboured it. I used to try and talk about it with him. He used to go, "Don't talk about it, don't talk about it," and he used to go off to the gym or do whatever he needed to do, which was his way of getting it out, I suppose. And in the end, we just didn't have that strength to hold us together. And I won't go into details, but it was pretty difficult at the time. And we ended up parting in 2013.
Well, I want to come on to talk a little bit about, I suppose, your resilience and your strength. But before I ask you a few questions on that, your journey didn't stop because your brother Robin was diagnosed, I think, was that 2013, with a brain tumour, and he passed away in 2018. You also went through a cancer journey yourself in 2016.
It was a horrendous year, actually, and I had to have a mastectomy and chemotherapy and radiotherapy and the whole shebang. And in fact, when I was actually lying on the operating table about to go under for my mastectomy, and I got the decree absolute through from my marriage, which was a bit weird. So it was like kind of two endings on one day. But anyway, but yeah, so we had that, and I had a year out, but I had amazing support during that year. I had some remarkable friends who stepped up, and many of whom had been there since the outset. It's very difficult with friends because some friends kind of just vanish off the face of the earth when you go through a tragedy, and some just kind of rise to it or they literally come out of nowhere, and they become like your main support network. And I had that. I was so lucky. I had these amazing people, and they're still there. So they kind of got me through that, and my family, obviously.
Spirituality and mediums. I think this has played a bit of a part in your journey over the last maybe 10, 15, 20 years
all
now.
In the book. It's all in the book.
It's all in the book. I can't believe some of the little moments that I've read in the book, and I would urge anybody to pick up the book because it's just a phenomenally powerful story. But yeah, tell me about your spiritual journey here.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back right to the very, very beginning, when I didn't really believe any of this stuff, was when Rosie was about 5, Ellie was about 8, and we were on holiday in Cornwall with my ex-husband, and one night in the hotel, there was a medium who, she was up for bookings, and we thought, oh, that'd be quite good, just to go for a laugh. So we went to have this reading, and this woman said, there's going to be another child. And I went, don't be stupid. I said, no, there isn't. We've got our 2 girls. Our life's really busy. David was a builder. We had this kind of really busy life. I was running the school. There was no way we'd entertain another child. And she went, there is going to be a child, but I'll tell you something, it's going to come after a very long gap. And I went, well, maybe it's a grandchild. And she said, no, she says, it's going to be a child, it's going to be a boy, and it's coming after a very long gap. So anyway, I'd written this down in this notebook and put this away, and then forgot all about it. And I was never really kind of like spiritual, really, until Rosie passed. And then I had this absolute urge to know where she'd gone and what was on the other side. And from the day that I saw the rainbow, really, I was seeing rainbows all the time. And every time there was a sort of poignant moment in my life or an important charity event, there would be the rainbow. Even like there was one day I was travelling up in a bus with the choir to go to John Radcliffe to sing. The kids were going to sing. And the kids all were going, oh, look, there's a rainbow. And we literally drove under it on the way up to Oxford. It was weird. It was really weird. Anyway, these rainbows continued to come, and they were with feathers as well. And I just had this really strong belief that Rosie kind of works through me. So whenever I don't know what to do with the charity or anything, I just send a message up there and I get my answer. And I believe that she looks after me, and I believe that she sent Dominic, and I believe that she pulls me through all this.
And that those kind of conversations that you've had and the books that you've read, it really has provided you, from what I've read, some real comfort that maybe there is something more. And again, that helped you, didn't it, with talking to Robin when he was going through what he was going through?
Absolutely, because Robin was also always quite interested in my beliefs. And when he was diagnosed, it became a bit of it really brought us really close together, actually. It became like a running conversation. And he was going, look, I'm not scared of actually being dead now, because I know that there's something on the other side. I'm just scared of the process. He had a brain tumour. But we actually went lots of times to see mediums because he wanted to do that. He used to go for healing to this amazing lady that I'd found. It gave him a lot of comfort, actually.
Yeah.
Knowing that there was something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, many people in midlife will find themselves questioning, I think, what truly matters. Do you think your journey has reshaped your beliefs about purpose and love and the things that we should hold on to?
Yeah. I mean, in the old days when I was, before all this happened, it was, I never really appreciated. We just used to kind of get through day to day, and we had a great life, but we didn't really appreciate what was important, which was like what's happening now, and the importance of family and friends and the people that really, really matter in your life. It's not about stuff that you have, it's about having all the love and support around you. Yeah, and I think that definitely has been a huge help to me, because I've been really lucky. I've never ever not had anybody to turn to. And there are people out there who have nobody.
So after facing such deep loss, what surprised you most about your own strength and the ability to keep moving forward, even in these difficult times? What have you learned about yourself?
When it first happened, I didn't think I could even survive half an hour, let alone, it's 20-something years now. Right back at the beginning, I literally thought I wasn't going to be able to live. But you do. Even if you don't want to, you still do. I just kind of concentrated on like the next 10 minutes or the next half an hour or the next day, and tried not to look too far ahead. And actually you do move ahead, even if you don't want to, and you find the strength somewhere. And now I really wish I'd known before all this happened how strong I could be, if that makes sense. I used to be, like, before all this happened, I think I was quite an introverted, kind of quiet person, and I'm not now. Well, I don't think I am now. I kind of get up and talk in front of anybody, but I would have been very, very nervous back in the old days, and I think now I've realised that as long as you're authentic, it doesn't matter if you kind of trip up a bit, So I can always kind of stand up in public and speak or whatever. And now I've got the strength to do so. So I think I found a confidence I never knew I had.
If you could go back and sort of speak to yourself at certain points in the midst of everything that you've been through, again, what wisdom would you share with yourself? I guess be confident, Carolyn, be confident. But
Yeah.
what else might you have said to yourself back then?
I think just maybe be a bit more open to other things that might come into your life, like other possibilities, rather than limiting yourself to what you know. Just kind of get out there and take a big step, because I think it took me a long, long time to come to that decision. I think I'm only coming to it now, really, when I'm just thinking, actually, everything that's passed, okay, it happened, and now actually, what do I want? What do I want out of life? And just to have the confidence and the courage just to take that step.
And again, this is a strange question, really, but because everybody goes on their own journey. But again, what would you share with others that have been through or going through, or about what you've learned, to give them some comfort? I mean, I think what you said earlier on, support seems to be a huge thing here, finding the right kind of support.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask for support. Seek support and let people help you as well. Don't say you're okay if you're not, because there were so many people that used to say to me, "You're okay." They would ring up and say, "Are you okay?" And do let me know if there's anything I can do. And you just don't. And it was the people that kind of stepped up above and beyond that, who came, literally just turned up with food or with just to be there for me. And they were the really helpful people, and they literally just did it rather than waiting to be asked. And I think you have to be don't be afraid to ask, and also don't be afraid to be a help to other people going through the same thing as well. Just say to them, "I'm here," and turn up with a shepherd's pie or whatever it is. Just doesn't matter what it is. Just kind of be there for them.
How does it make you feel when you see the good that the charity is doing? The looks on the children's faces, the support, the respite that you provided at times for the parents. How does that make you feel and the rest of your team?
I feel like it makes me feel really proud that I'm able to do it for Rosie. But I think she would be proud to know that this has happened in her honour. And yeah, I think, that's kind of it, really.
Yeah. Well, look, you've written was it your first book?
It is.
Is your first book? You've written your first book,
Yes.
of which
Yeah.
allowed... there it is. There it
There
is.
it is.
There it is.
Future is Rosie.
Yeah.
Because I believe that the future is Rosie, despite everything.
Yeah. No, it's I'll say it's a lovely book. That's a strange thing to say, but I did not realise quite the depth of your journey. Vicky said to me, my wife, we were going out on Saturday night, and I was reading the book, and she said, "Oh, just read out the chapter. Read the next chapter out while I'm putting my makeup on." And I'm laying there on the bed reading the book aloud. Unbeknownst that the chapter I was about to read was the one in May 2003. Really hard to read. I think
I think anyone who's got children, it's the worst possible thing that can happen to any parent losing a child.
Yeah. Well, look, credit to you for writing your first book, and obviously for everything you've done with the charity. What's next then, Carolyn? What's next for you?
Next for me, well, obviously more fundraising, more charity stuff. That is ongoing. I am doing some writing again. I want to publish some more books. I really love writing, and that book I wrote was actually the culmination of a lot of years of writing. Yeah. Because I'd always been a bit of a diarist, and I'd always written, and I find it really, really useful to write. Yeah. And I think there's a lot more I can say. Yeah. And in a lot more books, actually. Yeah. Both true and maybe some fiction. I'm about some fiction. I'm not sure if I can write that yet, but I'm going to try. And some travel, because I think there's a lot of places I want to see, a lot of things I want to do, and then to carry on bringing up my son, who's 16 now and just about to do GCSEs and wants to be a golfer. So he actually is looking at universities in the US, and I'm going, oh my gosh, that's so far away, and we have to do some research, and just to kind of be there for my family and enjoy life, really. Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking and being so honest and open and explaining your midlife journey. So Carolyn, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.